From Hong Kong, this is Mea Culpa, the Lessons Learned from Startups podcast. Based on the Postmodern Conference, where founders, investors, lawyers and mentors share their stories about working on, with or for startups. I'm Jeffrey Brewer, and today we talk to Sue Kim, founding partner at Libbler, a modern recruitment partner for high potential technology and financial talents. Before that, she was a banker and a technology consultant for financial service clients. Welcome, Sue.
Hi, good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Even with this situation going on, especially in Hong Kong, we managed to get a social distance podcast recording together. Right off the bat, how did you make your way into startups?
Okay, so that's a very good question, but also sometimes not that easy to answer, right? Because you want to go on and on about the background story. Maybe the place to start would be when I was still working in banking. And I was doing something relevant, right? So I was COO at the time, looking at workforce strategy across the region in Asia, and looking at the challenges of talent management, attracting and hiring and retaining talent. And through those projects, I saw a lot of, challenges that we were facing as one company. And we thought, okay, there's definitely some ways to do this better. So it was just an idea that was kind of boiling in the background. But obviously, as any entrepreneur that starts off from a corporate background, you have to kind of be ready, right? When do you pull the trigger? And I was, really good friends with my co-founder. At the time, we're just basically drinking buddies. And used to just kind of always say, okay, I'm ready now. No, I'm ready next. Or, we're just always just like discussing when we will be ready to do this. And one day we're like, you know what, let's just go. Banking isn't exactly what we thought we would be, right? So we had been, both of us, like working at least a decade by then. We felt like we had learned everything we wanted to learn. We were secure enough in our kind of abilities to take it forward. So we just said, let's do it. So that was in 2011. And, obviously we went through so many changes in our business, and I can walk you through that. But yeah, so that's kind of how we started.
Before I saw that you indeed was a banker, probably a huge difference in being a banker and doing your own startup. Well, when you, as a banker, you said you were operational responsible for Asia Pacific. That means that, of course, also hiring, but also a lot of other things. Why still that hiring staff see the friction and thought we can make some money out of it? Because there are a lot of hiring agencies already out there.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's also a very good question. So we didn't start on day one with an idea, okay, we're going to start a recruitment agency, right? We've actually gone through a few evolutions. So I guess when I was working in a big organization, also being in a role where my role was to optimize our workforce, right? So what that means is, are there ways to do this better and also cheaper, essentially, right? So we are trying to look for ways to outsource to, for example, cheaper locations. Are there ways to upskill the existing staff? Do we need to introduce different training programs, career path, and how do we keep the best talent? So those were things that were always in the back of our mind. And at the time, this is post-Lehman crisis, and when a lot of the banks were rebuilding, right? So there was a lot of growth. And when we spoke about the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, the quote unquote hiring plans were really massive, right? But finding the best talent in Asia, it's the truth everywhere, but especially in many different countries with very different cultural backgrounds, we did struggle. And we always had to customize how we attract the best talent. So there were a lot of projects that were ongoing, and maybe the idea of, okay, we can do hiring better wasn't so new, but we thought, okay, it's not rocket science, right? You would think, if you have the right business proposition, you could attract the best talent. But maybe a lot of what happens in the process, how you present yourself, how you meet, how you introduce the talent, all of that process was where it needed some change. So that was kind of our initial idea.
At that point, you're in a comfortable situation. You have a salary.
Salary. Yeah.
At that point, how did you make your transition into like, we're really going to do this right now? How did you prepare for that? Did you like started to save up like years before, or did you at one point just said, I have enough, now I'm going to do this? Like, what was that decision making, especially in the way of, yes, we're going to do this now, and I don't know, X amount of runway?
Yeah, sure. So I wish I could tell you it was like, years of planning. We had very good cushion and it was fine. And at least for me, I didn't really plan it properly, to be honest, right? So I said, in my rationale at the time, I thought, okay, if I fail, and I could easily, then at least I'm sure I can find a job. That literally was the only thing that was keeping me, I guess, not too worried. Second, I do feel like, okay, you could really try to save up. Obviously, you don't want to be, not like can't pay rent and bills for the short term. So I would really recommend anyone to at least be okay to be able to pay your own bills, right? And whether we were successful and were able to hire and pay for our stuff, that was secondary, right? Like, let's even before we launch anything, make sure that we are viable and comfortable. So luckily, yes, by the time, having worked for a few years, we had some savings. But yeah, there was no proper planning.
So how's it feeling when you're basically handing your resignation letter, like when you're quitting your job? How was that feeling? Like, how did that go? What was the reactions of your colleagues, but also what was the reaction of the people around you, like family, friends?
Sure. So maybe backtracking a little bit, I think I'll start with my family, because I think I had a bizarre childhood that kind of maybe explains a lot of my maybe very impulsive behavior. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, right? So we were in Korea in this like small fishing village. He decided he's going to do a bunch of random businesses. Like, you can name a business, and my dad has done it, and he's failed in all of them, by the way. So he's done like a gas station, grocery store, like some import, export business, travel, you name it, right? And then at the time, there was a big, growth in Latin America, and he decided he wants to go there to also do some business. So that my family basically were a struggling entrepreneurial family in Korea and then in Argentina. And then he did that over in the US. So every time he would start a business, it wasn't okay, this could be the big thing. It was, okay, I can start a business. It will be viable. So it was like always some sort of readiness to start something. So for me, actually, when I went into banking, it was almost like a step up, right? So it's just, okay, there's a salary. I want to find out what that is. But for me, that was the weird thing, right? So when I was ready to hand in the resignation, I think I had told all my colleagues so many times that I want to do my own thing eventually, that it wasn't shocking at all. My boss actually laughed at me and said, okay, it was about time, because you quit 3 times. And this is true. I quit 3 times before that because I had another business idea. And then each time, the first time I quit, it wasn't the same boss back in New York, just laughed at me and basically said, look, you're too young, you have no experience, and whatever this business idea is terrible, so no. He rejected my resignation and said, stay 1 more year, and then if you are still ready, then you can do it then, right? So let's say I had those conversations frequently. Right before I quit, the year before, I was doing pretty well, working really hard, but I just felt like I kind of knew what I was doing, so I wanted some bigger challenge. So I had asked for some sort of internal entrepreneurial project, right? So something that has never been done, my own budget, own idea that I had to implement. So in a way that really prepared me for the big jump.
Actually, at that point, we should also talk to your father about failures in entrepreneurship.
Yes.
You quit 3 times your job before that, but at that point, people said you shouldn't do this. The last time you did that, people didn't stop you.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's from the work side. But how was it from your friends and family side at that
Sure.
point? I don't know if you were in a long-term relationship at that point, or
Sure.
I don't know if you at that point had any friends or family that didn't
Yeah,
want you to go
sure.
through that. How did you cope with that, and what was their reaction?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So obviously my dad said, "Oh, of course, that's obvious." My mom who had to suffer through my dad's, decisions. She said, "Oh, I mean, it's about time. I knew you would do whatever you want to do anyway." Colleagues, yeah, less shocked. I think obviously some people kind of advised against it. They always felt like, this is yet another career company. I'm not sure necessarily you have what it takes. I was actually told by some truth-telling friends that, told me that maybe you don't have what it takes to start a business, right? Um, and also at the time I was dating someone that was an entrepreneur, so he was kind of halfway through banking and leaving to start his own thing. So in a way, my environment, my social circle, except for a few that were advising against it, actually was very supportive. So I know some entrepreneurs go through like fights with their family. Luckily, I didn't have that.
And
Oh,
then,
sorry, another thing,
yeah,
since you bring up relationship. And also as a Korean woman in her 30s, right? A lot of my friends were getting pressured to get married or at least be like seriously dating. And when are you going to have babies? Again, my parents, because they are weird in a good way, they never pressure me. So it was totally fine to be quote unquote single and a struggling entrepreneur.
so they were not the typical Asian parents.
No.
Okay.
Very lucky.
And then you decided to quit your job together with your co-founder. You have to hand in your laptop, your access card for the bank, and then what's next? Hire an office or go to the Starbucks, or what? What was the first step? Like, what was the first step that you did to actually make this company work?
Sure. Okay, so the first thing you do is to get rid of your apartment because, as you know, rent in Hong Kong is prohibitive, right? Without a steady job. So I got rid of mine and then I moved in with my co-founder. So not only, and we slept in the same room, right? So we were working together. I mean, we call it the garage of our living room in a small Hong Kong apartment. We slept together, right? And then at some point we had interns coming in, so we actually started in the apartment. And then the first, let's say, I remember the first week, the first few days, right? When you're okay, now I'm finally full time doing this, because leading up to that for, let's say, 4 months or so, 4 to 5 months, I was doing it every evening and weekend, right? And then in between, anything, any time that I could find. But now that it's full time, and all of a sudden you think you have so much time, right? Because you think, okay, now I can do these 5 projects at the same time. So maybe I'm sure we're gonna go into the mistakes, but that was our first shock when we said, okay, now that we're both full time, these are the 10 things we need to get done, and then this is the timeline, and all of that. So it was really exciting.
What was the actually very first thing you did on the very early first morning when you started out together, like working on the business after you moved in and you like started working on, like, what was the very first thing? Was it, I don't know, setting up, register a domain name, or was that calling the first potential client or the first potential candidate? What was it?
It was still, we were still building the website at the time, right? So we had done all of the, registration, coming up with, all the logos, all of the fun stuff that you do first before I quit. So now it was just a progression. So it wasn't anything too drastic in terms of like what I did on the first day, but I do remember saying, okay, now let's review the plan again. This is where we are. We're going to set the milestones, and this is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. So I remember just doing a lot of planning those first few days.
And obviously, you're doing recruiting.
Yes.
What makes Libbler different from any other recruiting agency?
Yeah, sure. Because at the beginning, we were never going to set up a pure recruitment agency, right? So we started with the idea that we wanted to offer career path mentoring to different professionals. I guess within our industry, within finance, because that's what we knew. But at the beginning, we said, okay, it could be any industry. It could be consulting, could be marketing. As long as we knew how to mentor different early career professionals, how to look for a job, how to market themselves, etc. Right? So we started actually building a lot of online content, and for free. Right at the beginning, we didn't know exactly how we wanted to take the business forward. Then we started doing a lot of career mentoring workshops on campuses. So we went to everywhere, like Hong Kong, India, Korea, just to offer free workshops. And then based on that, we started gathering the community. So we actually grew kind of organically. And then we started offering internships. And then after that grad program, so we grew up with our talent pool from day one. I guess 9 years now running, right? So it's the real focus on mentoring side of things. And of course, when we said, okay, how do we monetize that? What are some different business models? We started to work with companies that were also growing and wanted not just, okay, I have one headcount that I need to hire, but actually sit down, explain the business model. What is the type of pipeline we want to so do a proper workforce strategy, and then help us build the talent pool, right? So that's kind of where the angle itself is different. The second thing we wanted to do is like, okay, we always wanted to be a technology online business. What does that mean, right? Of course, it's a people business. You have to meet them in person. You have to get every single account exactly the same traditional way. But we were constantly looking for ways to automate and improve on what humans can do. And we came up with now many years, like fast forward, it's the matching process. So where a lot of recruiters spend their time and effort that they could spend on actually meeting people and really mentoring them. It's just, reading through CVs, trying to understand what they are, reaching out. So a lot of that workflow, the matching, that's where we are trying to spend a lot of time improving. Yes.
Don't you have artificial intelligence for that recently that just makes that very easy for you?
Mm-hmm.
Generalizing here, of course, but
Yeah, of course.
I know that doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Why do you think that doesn't work, or maybe can help but not full 100 yards? How does that affect your current business?
Sure. Whenever I look at anything that says data science for or AI for, fill in the blank, you're starting with the data or AI part, and then you are filling the blank, and that's why it doesn't work, right? The reason why we built our own algo, of course, there are many, I guess, solutions out there that we could just come in and plug into the whole recruitment process. But it's really built over the years based on our own success and failures. Every profile that we have assessed, any learning points that we get from those real recruitment projects. So quote unquote, the data we collect is actual life cases. Second, when we do matching and the matching actually works, we have to dissect it and then build that into the algo. So our own algo has been built over the years based on real projects. So sometimes when I see a lot of these other AI solutions, it's just, okay, let's grab the data and see what we can, if you want to read some patterns based on a big data, then what you might get as a result may not have anything to do with reality, right? So that's, I think, where the biggest differentiator of where AI actually works versus AI that's like, okay, in theory it works, but maybe in practical, in practice it doesn't really work well. Yeah.
And then coming back to your story, is that you started up and then were you, as of the first month, cash flow positive, or like how did that first invoice to a client that paid? How did that work? Did you go out for dinner with your first revenue that you got in, or how was that?
I think the first year, building the website, all of that was out of pocket. right? And we wanted to delay any sort of fundraising as long as possible, right? And it's not because we don't believe in it. Obviously, you need capital to really grow, but we didn't want to spend our time in trying to convince other people how we see things, right? So we said, okay, as long as we can, we'll build and test things that we are comfortable with as founders. And then at some point, we're going to scale up, right? So that means, the website or any sort of designers, developers, we had to pay them out of pocket as long as we could last, right? So they say the first few months. And then when we started seeing some result, obviously there was a huge demand in terms of training, right? So I said, you know what, let's make money. Let's just start charging for this training. So I started doing corporate training, right? And then also for some of these internships, they're more than happy to pay. Try different pricing points. Some worked really well, some didn't work so well. So I remember the first real recruitment project we did. We didn't know exactly how to charge. So we were asking friends that are in other agencies, like, how much do you charge for something like this, right? So it was a lot of learning process of how the industry works, and us trying to see if something different could work also. So during that process, we kept testing, there's like traditional projects and that at this cost. Can we try something more intense or lighter at different pricing points? So that's kind of how we started. So I don't remember exact point. I think it was even in the first year, we were making a little bit to test, but of course not enough to pay the bills. Yeah.
So that means that you were doing competitive-based pricing, not really value-added pricing or like value-focused pricing, because it could be that you're giving with your services way more value than your competitors are asking.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you juggle those kind of pricing points and feedback? Because how did you get the feedback from people, clients at that point, if you were asking, I don't know, say $100,
yeah,
but actually their value was 1,000, but they will probably not tell you that the value was 1,000 because it was pretty cheap to get it from you, so they don't want the price to go up. Like how did you juggle with those kind of feedback? How did you get that feedback from them?
Yes. We tried a little bit of everything, right? Again, I wish I could tell you like, oh, we had the strategy, but the strategy, quote unquote, is something you learn as you go, right? So we had cases where clients said, Sue, I will pay more. And by the way, this is what everybody's paying, so you should charge 3 times what you're asking. Versus clients that said, you guys are not the big companies, so I'm giving you the chance, so it should be free or very cheap. We took both, right? Because, again, it's still early phases. What do we have to lose, right? And then we treated every project with the same rigor. So whether it was like a very big project worth, let's say more than $100,000 versus a project that would cost $5,000, we treated it exactly the same. So then, of course, that means at some point you start to tweak exactly the effort, and then you start to see the actual ROI on the projects. So that's how we learned. And then we know, for example, a type of segment of clients and what their pricing point is and at what service level, right? But that's after, I don't know, having spoken to a few hundred clients, having worked on many, many projects, done really well on some, didn't do so well on some, right? So you just learn over time.
Doing that, of course, as you said, like you probably made a lot of mistakes in there. Like, what was your biggest mistake? What was the biggest story that you said, in hindsight, we could have foreseen that, or we shouldn't have done that in that way? Like, can you tell a little bit of a story there?
Yes. Okay, so let's say at the beginning, we wanted to be a career development company. Okay, what does that mean? And it could mean, a CV clinic, right? Very specific to, okay, we help actually recruit for, and then what industries? We put the scope so big. Every career development topic, every level, basically, and not just finance where we were good at, but let's start everything. So I remember talking to like Disneyland, Pepsi, without real, I guess, expertise in any of these markets. It was very interesting because I did get to meet, I remember I met with like 200 companies, and they were happy to meet for me to collect information, which was really surprising, right? And learn how they hire, how, what are the biggest challenges, what's missing in the market. But just doing that really slowed us down. I think I think it was like 3 or 4 years into the business where we actually said, let's go very narrow. We know the market well. Our network is in banking. We know a lot of hedge funds that are hiring and they're happy to pay. Let's start very small there. And that's how we grew much quicker, right? Because after that, then once we know how to service this segment, then we are able to go into, prop trading companies, family offices. And then it's still within the asset management business. And then what can we do? Now we can go into fintech. After we are servicing fintech, we can go into tech companies. So we're actually growing in much natural way. Before it was like everything, and then we just like didn't have a focus. That's probably the number one mistake. But what was driving that mistake was our assumption that you can do everything. As a founder, you feel like, I could do marketing. Yes, I could do social media. I could also mock up the website. I could also talk to clients. I could also do recruitment. There's so many things that you just assume you could figure out, because otherwise you're not an entrepreneur if you don't have this mindset, right? It's great because you need to be this way, but also it's actually probably the number one mistake.
And at one point, did you realize for yourself, yes, this is really a viable business. This is really something that we can take on and grow? Was that in like months' time? Was that in years' time? When was that point that you said, we struck gold here?
Sure. There were, I think, many phases. Like the first, quote unquote, we didn't think it was struck gold, but we knew it was well received, was actually during the early phases when we were doing those free career workshops. We knew that every single workshop that we were offering, we will receive a lot of feedback saying, this is really helpful. I never received this type of mentoring before. So that we knew it was a real need. But again, we weren't monetizing. We didn't know exactly what to do with this, right? Second time we did that was when we started to actually charge. So even though the pricing and the types of projects were really uneven, we knew that there were companies willing to pay for something, some sort of matching or people strategy service. But again, it was still really unclear. We were spread so thin, trying to do many different types of projects. But when we said, we have to survive. We have to now start making money, right? Like we just ran out of money. We can't, and there's not even a very specific product to be able to raise capital. So when we went narrow and started servicing real clients that were happy to pay for that kind of partnership, that's when we saw the market. We saw the product and the market. And then we just doubled down. We put all our efforts into it to be able to then grow as a team and then also invest back into the technology, the thing that we wanted to do from the beginning, but we just didn't have focus before.
And how far along in the journey was that?
I remember it was 2014. That's when we said we need to just, narrow the hell down. We are going to die trying to do something here. So I guess that was 2 years, 2.5 years, right? If you count the time I was working, on the side, yeah. 2.5 years of kind of doing a lot of things and then having grand ideas, By then, the original plan was every industry, every segment, China, like all of APAC, right? That's kind of the plan you set for yourself, yeah.
And then you find it focused and you go on there full force. Did you at that point raise any additional capital for that, or was the cash flow enough to start funding that?
Yeah, so luckily, immediately we were positive. So then we were able to, again, get more runway to test different ideas while doubling down on getting more clients and projects. So since then, we actually haven't had to raise any capital, and we're able to pay for all the infrastructure as well as the team.
And how scalable is your current solution for that? Because it's still an agency, it's still like a matching recruitment agency. So how scalable is your current setup?
Yeah, sure. So I would say now it's very scalable. So now I would say in the last few months, we are testing the more scalable model, right? So we've been working on building this more online, more automated solution that we've been working on while trying to grow our team. So in terms of the ability to take on more projects and being more accurate, and therefore generating hopefully more revenue with less headcount, it's there, right? So all the pieces are set up. Obviously, we're hit by this coronavirus situation, but luckily we haven't been fully impacted because, again, the segment we're servicing now is still within finance. And in terms of pure headcount and hiring hasn't been fully impacted yet. Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the coronavirus already, but how does that impact the industry right now? It's still finance. People still use financial product. It's not retail. How do you see that reflecting in your current day-to-day business?
The biggest impact, obviously, if there's any sort of headcount freeze or headcount changes, that's the more direct impact. But as an industry, as you know, some people make money, some people lose money, even in this environment, right? So in general, our clients are continuing to hire. And we are now expanding, as I mentioned, into fintech business, a lot of online, as well as traditional technology businesses that a lot of them are doing really well and actually growing. So in terms of growth net, it's the same. But then the hiring practice, how do you interview candidates? We have to quickly adapt to arranging all VC interviews, making sure everything is, well connected. So, and also our staff, right? Or our recruiters are not meeting people for coffee. Everything has to be on the phone and over VC. So you have to be able to be impactful without meeting the person. So that's, I think, the biggest, very interesting impact to our business.
And that's working so far, or are there still a few challenges that either cannot or still have to be resolved?
I think the biggest thing that needs to be resolved for us, I think not just us, right, but any startup, I would say, is to know the future, to understand how this will pan out. Because it's always the question of when will it end? When do we go back to normal? Is the new normal so different from the old normal that we have to adapt permanently? For example, for hiring, does it mean there will be more remote workers and companies that are accepting work from home as a norm? So all these things are raising questions, right, for our clients as well as us. That's where we said, okay, you know what? We cannot foresee anything. So we have to assume that it's business as usual. So, but I'm doing that and I'm assuring everyone that, okay, let's just continue and then try to survive and thrive in the market. I also know, right, we're all doubting exactly how it could look like in the future.
Talking about the future, what are the next steps for you right now when you have that scalability? Is that international growth? Is that conquering the world?
Conquering the world.
What's next for you?
Sure. So I guess going back to your question of scalability, right? If I look at the pieces needed to be scalable, right? What are our key IP, right? So we have the database, right? So the talent database that continue to come and join our team. And then we have the team that we put together now. We've trained up kind of the Libbler way. And then we have the technology to make the workflow more automated and slick and be able to handle different types of workflows. So having put all those pieces together, now, I mean, sky is the limit in a way. We have to then go and source more clients and projects. So putting all those things together took a long time. But now that we're at the cusp of being able to scale up, really, we could test different markets as well. So is it just Hong Kong? We're now servicing Hong Kong and Singapore. Would we go to China next? Will we go to the US? I mean, who knows, right? So I think I used to say, this is my 5-year plan. I don't do that anymore. We are going to go where the demand is.
During this whole process of the last 9 years?
9 years, yes.
9 years. You obviously got a lot of advice.
Yes.
Can you pick one thing that you got as an advice, maybe one time or maybe multiple times, that you don't really agree on?
That's a very good question. So we were okay. So yes, we spoke to a lot of people that have maybe invested in businesses, right? So we were connected early on. A lot of different investors or mentors were happy to chat. And the approach there was always kind of how to make the next Uber, right? So literally every other advice would be, well, if you want to create the Uber of whatever, then this is not the way you do it. You create not quick and dirty, but some plugin, something that works with the existing world, how things are done, and then you raise capital and then scale up. So it was always some different angle of the same advice, right? And again, or they would put certain business into buckets. Is it high growth business or lifestyle business? I understand the distinction, but actually, as you know, the world changes so drastically all the time, and we're evolving very rapidly. The businesses that you create, you are allowed to change your strategy and how much you want to grow, where you want to stop, what type of funding you want to employ. So I just felt like a lot of investors or mentors out there give more sort of cookie cutter advice that is meant to then make you quite successful, right? Whatever reality or whatever product, it might be your thing. So that's the one thing that I would say I disagree with. If I could talk to any founder, I always say, okay, what is your thing? And it's probably something that I don't know anything about. You are the expert, I'm not, right? I can advise you on how you should approach as a founder, your personal journey, what not to do from just purely mistakes and very blatant mistakes. But in terms of saying, okay, this is the formula, the magic formula to make your business a unicorn business, because somehow that's how we should all, target. That's probably one advice that I really hate the most.
And what's the most valuable advice you ever gotten?
This advice I got from one person. He's actually a very successful entrepreneur in Korea. And he will meet with us anytime, right? He's so busy, but he's been able to scale up his business. And every time he's like, always asks one question. He's like, why are you doing something that you're not good at? That's literally every single time I speak to him. Just be very good at one thing. And I'm sorry, but you both come from finance. You know the market. You are able to bring something that other, for example, career companies or recruitment agencies can't handle. So you could be the next, Hong Kong, Singapore finance recruitment agency, right? Instead of looking at apps or different solutions, that can come later on, right? So just be a category killer. So that's how he and other mentors used to tell us. So that every time we go back to our basics and then we say, oh, actually this worked, it's always going back to that same advice.
And what is something that's not a secret, but most people don't know about you?
Let's see. I think because I'm I'm friendly and I'm sociable. I'm happy to talk to anyone, and I'm able to relate to maybe people from very different backgrounds. People assume that I like to socialize and I like to just meet people. My favorite thing to do is actually read and be by myself. If I could be alone for a week without talking to anyone, that would be like my heaven, right? So doing a lot of like research work, those really like heavy grunt research work versus like talking to people. So I know it's like counterintuitive, but yeah, that's a big secret.
And if there's one thing you want people to take away from this talk, what is it?
I think, I mean, sorry, I have to think about this question. I think everything has to be personal, right? So if you have done any business for many, many years, right, you have many days where you don't know why you're doing this, right? It's tough, right? When you make a mistake or just having a bad day, week, or month, a quarter, you really have to. You are the engine of growth, whether you like it or not, right? Whether you want to be the engine. If you stop, the business stops, right? So you have to be so clear in your head why you're doing it. And if you haven't had that talk with yourself, I'm sorry, you will struggle, you will quit, you will question yourself all the way. You have to have blind faith in what you're doing and why you're doing it. But then the rest of it, you can control. So whether you thought you could do many more things much faster, how your clients and, are responding to your product, coronavirus, anything, you cannot control how the world sees your product and how it's received. So all you can do is try your best to continue to get closer to it. So having both a perspective that, okay, you know what, it's not going to be exactly the way you want it. So just letting go a big part of, your belief, but also being blindly faithful to what you believe in and your principles. I think that's really the key takeaway from all of this.
Okay, I want to thank you for your valuable insights and sharing of your lessons learned in startups.
Thank you so much for the invite, Jeff.
For the listeners, although the rating system of podcasts is hideous, if you like this Mea Culpa series, you can rate this podcast with 5 stars as a motivation for the makers. This is Jeffrey Brewer, and normally I would say go out and build something meaningful, but in these days, just stay inside and build something meaningful. Yeah. Thank you.